Welcome in, everybody, to the Fantasy Football Podcast right here on Fantasy Pros. It is me, Joey P, Joe Pizzapia. It is Mike Tagliere. It's Kyle Yates, and it's you. And today, we got a fun show for you. We got a little debate about some ECR, some running backs, and some wide receivers in early expert consensus rankings that we're looking at, and we're saying, you know what? We don't like where the herd is. And certainly some will be up, some will be down, and we're going to break them all down for you here on the program today. And in case you haven't noticed, we've been doing a whole lot of podcasts lately and a little shorter version. So more podcasts for you, more content. Every single day we're trying to give you something here over at Fantasy Pros. So we hope you're enjoying this push of content in a time where no one else is giving you what we're giving you. We're givers, Tags, at the end of the day, right? I feel like you are always the gift that just never stops giving, and sometimes I wish you would just take a little bit more time for yourself, maybe go play some golf or do something else for Tags, because you just give and give and give.
Wow. I don't even know what to do with this intro. I'm a giver, apparently, Yates. Welcome to Friday. I got nothing.
Oh, Yates, that makes you the taker on the show. I just want you to know. You're just constantly, it's just all about Yates. We've all got to work around his schedule. We got to move things around to make sure that his hair is right for the program and all these other things.
Is that Tags gives and gives and gives, and sometimes I wish that he would just stop giving. You know, like just stop talking a little bit, buddy. You know.
Sounds about right. This is exactly where we should start on a Friday. This is the perfect tone to set for the show.
The wife says the same thing, by the way.
Yeah, no shock there. All right, by the way, if you want to follow along with us here, you can go to fantasypros.com/rankings, and of course, you can go check out the fantasypros.com/draftwizard as well, and start to get your mock draft on. We just did a show earlier in the week, in case you missed it, a really short podcast. Tags and I talked about why it's good to start mocking and get a feel for what the board looks like, and that's what we're going to do today. Just get a feel for a couple players that right out just stand out. I know Tags and Yates have been working really hard on their rankings, on their projections, and they have certain players that are not necessarily in conjunction with ECR. I'm working on the Black Book. That should be out June 1st. There are some players that I see as highs and lows of ECR too that kind of are red flags to me, good and bad, and we're going to break them down for you, as I said. But first, I want to also tell everybody about that giveaway we've got from Pristine Auction, Calvin Ridley autographed jersey, and all you got to do is leave a review on Apple Podcasts or CastBox. Go over to fantasypros.com/contest, drop that screenshot, fill it out, and boom, just like that, you could win a Calvin Ridley autographed jersey thanks to pristineauction.com. Let us begin, gentlemen, if we may, with the running backs. And Yates, I'm going to let you go first because, like you said, Tags just talks and talks and talks. So I want you to go first and feel like you've got an opportunity to have the floor. Who is the most, in your opinion, maybe overrated running back that you feel like going into the season so far, which you've seen the early consensus tell you?
Yeah, as far as overrated, now let me just say this, like, first things first, the talent of this player, insane. I love the player himself, but this ranking of, in our ECR, the expert consensus ranking, this ranking of Saquon Barkley at RB3, I feel like is a little aggressive because with Saquon, he has not been healthy the past couple seasons. He's obviously left early each of the past 2 years. That has to be baked into a little bit in his price tag here. Also, his standout season, his rookie season, the reason why he was so good was because he was getting a ton of work on through the air, right? With Eli Manning constantly checking it down to him and being able to create after the catch. That was what made him so valuable for fantasy. Now with a loaded offense here, Kenny Golladay, Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard, Kadarius Toney in the first round, they're going to get him involved. Evan Ingram, Kyle Rudolph. All these players indicate that the target volume there for Saquon is not going to be there. Is he going to be heavily utilized on the ground? Absolutely. Is he going to be very effective? Is he going to have high yards per carry? Absolutely. He's an insane talent. But the ranking of RB3 here, he needs to get a ton of work through the air to justify that, and it's not taking into account at all his injury risk. So I just feel like if he was RB6, RB7, I feel like that would be perfectly fine, but that RB3 ranking, you need him to be healthy the entire year to justify that. I don't know if we can fully rely on that.
You know what's comical to me is everyone keeps telling me about the Derrick Henry workload and the worry and concern about that. But how about the worry and concern of RB3 of Saquon Barkley with the lack of playing time in the last few years and all the injuries he's had? And yet he is at 3 and Derrick Henry's at 4, 5, 6, depending on where different people have him on the board. And that's just kind of shocking to me. So I should worry about the thing that hasn't happened yet instead of the thing that's happened 2 years in a row. I struggle with that. I'm on the same page with you. Tags, give me a couple of the running backs for you that stick out as overvalued right now in terms of ECR.
One for me right off the top, and I know a lot of people are going to be pissed about this one, but I don't really care. It's Jonathan Taylor. I don't understand why Jonathan Taylor has become the consensus number 1 or number 2 pick in dynasty drafts. I don't understand why he's going in the middle of the first round of redrafts. I don't get it. I think people are forgetting after week 10, people were legit thinking about dropping Jonathan Taylor in redraft leagues. I remember people literally attacking me on Twitter and saying, how are you going to keep ranking this guy as a start? He's dumb. He's drop him. Do whatever you need to do. And that was without Marlon Mack on the roster, guys. And then all of a sudden, people want to talk about David Montgomery like the end of his schedule was so easy, and that's why he finishes the RB4. I have a newsflash here for you guys. Through 10 weeks of the NFL season, Jonathan Taylor was the RB19. David Montgomery was the RB20. Jonathan Taylor finished the year as the RB6. Montgomery finishes the RB4. And before you go and say, again, Montgomery's schedule, let's take a look at Jonathan Taylor's schedule, shall we? He played the Texans twice, the Packers, the Raiders, the Jaguars, and then the Steelers, who, by the way, when he did play them, they were decimated with injuries. So that was the only tough matchup, and he did play well, and that I'm not going to take that away from him. What I am going to take away from him is that he plays for Frank Reich, a coach that has loved going with a timeshare. They didn't need to re-sign Marlon Mack. They had Jordan Wilkins on the roster. Instead, they're going to say, we're bringing Marlon Mack back. And if you guys recall, back in week 1 last year, Marlon Mack had 8 touches. Jonathan Taylor had 0. I was one leading the charge on Jonathan Taylor last year, saying, draft him in the 3rd or 4th round. He's going to be a tremendous value. He's a discounted Nick Chubb. After watching last year transpire, I feel less confident in Jonathan Taylor now. And in fact, you can wait around and get Nick Chubb. Now Nick Chubb is the discounted Jonathan Taylor, and he arguably might be the better fantasy option.
Wait, you just blew my mind. So Nick Chubb is now the discounted Nick Chubb? This feels like a very Matrix kind of moment there where I want to take the red pill or blue pill, and I'm just not sure which way to go. And in case you're wondering what Tags is talking about in terms of the rankings to you, I just want to be clear so there's no confusion. We're talking half PPR here in terms of rankings in ECR, RB6. That's where Tags is saying it's too much, it's too high. So who's the other guy for you, Tags, besides Taylor that you feel like is also in that precipice where you don't like the value of where he is currently according to what your research is telling you?
Yeah, and this player I like, but I think the love has gone a little bit too far, and it's Antonio Gibson. He's the RB13 in consensus right now, and so many people are going to come after me and say, he finishes the RB12 last year, Tags. It's because he scored 11 touchdowns on 170 carries. When you break it down, again, this comes back to a coaching scheme and understanding the way that they're using their running backs in Washington. And part of it had to do with the fact that he wasn't a running back in college and they wanted to ease him in. I get that. I really do. But at the same time, J.D. McKissick didn't go away. Peyton Barber's still on the roster. They brought in Curtis Samuel, who has experience in this offense. They're going to give him 20-plus carries on the season. There's more talent at wide receiver. The average number of snaps played by a top 12 fantasy running back last year, not named Antonio Gibson, was 42.4 snaps per game. Antonio Gibson played 28.9 snaps per game. So yes, he should get more carries this year. They should trust him a little bit more, but at the same time, he's going to be fighting for targets with those other guys. And on top of it, Ryan Fitzpatrick does not really check down all that often to his running backs, so that's a detriment to his value. So I believe that there's a chance that Antonio Gibson finishes as a high-end RB2, low-end RB1. I do. But you're paying for it right now if you draft him as the RB13.
Well, that's what's so important, I think, with all these we're going to bring up, which is cost, and whether or not we want to pay the cost for a guy that we know is going to be that, or a guy that we're going to pay less cost for a guy that could become, and that's always what you're trying to do, because what you want to do in a draft is build that core roster strength, where you're getting the guys that you know who they are in those first few rounds, so then as the draft goes on, you could take those shots at the guys who are going to outperform where they are. I'm going to go throw one out there for me, too, which is Miles Sanders at RB16. Look, the offensive line didn't exactly get so much better year over year. It's a new coach, new playbook, basically a whole new system to learn, and I'm just concerned that everything doesn't gel well. And I think everyone's kind of doing a lazy thing here, which is saying, oh, Doug Peterson's gone, that means Miles Sanders is free. Well, I don't know, does it? I mean, Gainwell just came in too, and
Kerryon Johnson they signed.
Kerryon Johnson just got signed, exactly. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't know how I feel about this. Old Miles Sanders is automatically going to be better just because, once again, it's that easy addition by subtraction, which I hate. I call it lazy fantasy. It's the worst thing. I don't like it. Miles Sanders for me is that one guy that I would put there, and that's RB16. So we have Miles Sanders, Jonathan Taylor, Antonio Gibson, and Saquon Barkley as some of those guys for us. Yates, let's circle back to you. But before we do, I want to take a quick moment here to give a shout out to Sheath Underwear because it's one of our sponsors on the show. They have boxers that are designed to keep your balls off your legs, which is good. That is never underrated. Let me tell you something like that. That's always a good thing. Okay, Sheath has 3 individual compartments that keep everything down there separate, cool, and comfortable. And traditional boxer briefs, let's face it, are basically barbaric and invented during the Neanderthal era, which is also when Tag started covering football. Sheath has modern ergonomic technology that's intended to prevent skin and skin contact for durations that can build up heat and sweat. Plus, it's also been developed by one of our own U.S. Army soldiers who came up with the idea for Sheath Underwear. So, very cool there. Support a veteran business here and also support your veterans at the same time. So here's what you're going to do. You go to sheathunderwear.com/fantasypros for 20% off your order today. That's SHEATH underwear.com/fantasypros and make sure you use that promo code fantasypros at checkout. That's sheathunderwear.com for 20% off. And of course, your balls. Well, thank you. We do a lot of stuff about your balls here, and I want everybody to understand that, you know, we care. We care. I know Yates really cares deep down, too. He's like, look, we need to do more things to help people with their balls. That's what we're trying to do here, and we mean the footballs. That's what the fantasy footballs. What'd you think I was, Yates? Your mind out of the gutter. Come on, Yates. You know, I mean, jeez. All right, let's shift gears here and try to get Yates back on track. Let's go with your inverse here, the guy who's underrated for you at running back compared to ECR.
Absolutely. With Joe Mixon is the guy that I'm going to bring up here, and it's because he's going as RB12 right now in ECR. And yes, we do have to talk about the injury concerns. You know, I can already hear the people that are yelling at their phones if they're listening, or yelling at their car radio, whatever, wherever they're listening to it, saying, you just talked about Saquon Barkley and you talked about him as an injury risk, and now you're going to talk about Joe Mixon. I totally get it, but it's the price tag here. Where you look at Saquon at RB3, and he has the concerns of not only the injury, but then the passing volume. With Joe Mixon, there are no concerns about volume whatsoever. It all comes down to his injury risk. And I think that for Mixon, if he had been shut down the way that Christian McCaffrey was last year, rather than this prolonged, like, oh, we think that he's going to be back this week. You guys remember that from last year? It was like, Mixon will be back this week. Oh, nope, he's going to be back next week. He'll be back this week. And it just continued and continued until they finally shut him down. If he had been shut down in week 7 or 8, whenever he went down with that injury, I think we would be having a totally different mindset of Joe Mixon. So for him to be going as RB12 off the board, when you sit down and you do projections for Mixon, the workload is off the charts and the talent is there. Everything lines up. It's now just the injury risk. And if I can get Mixon on my roster as an RB2 right now, which I think that ECR is 12, I think that he's going to be going even later in ADP. Wow. I think that people are going to be completely off of him. If I can get him as my RB2 on my roster and I get him for 10, 12 games this season, I'll consider that a win because I'm going to have a massive workload in those 10 to 12 games that's going to set me up to win some fantasy football matchups.
Look, again, you're absolutely right. It's about the cost. And as an RB2, potentially, Mixon is a league winner if he is on the field and playing. And let's not forget the financial commitment that the Bengals made to him. And I think that's something that's very important that played a role in last year's not playing. I think they looked at the landscape, said, our quarterback's hurt. Why are we pushing our running back into the field for a team that's going to lose a bunch of games anyway? We'll better our draft spot, and we'll protect our asset. Sorry, this is where the business of football ruins your fantasy football season, but I think that's exactly what happened last year with Mixon. Now, let's shift gears to Tags' undervalued guys, because Tags, you've got a second-year guy and a rookie on your list that you think right now are not getting enough respect in terms of ECR.
Najee Harris is undervalued right now. It's not close. I don't think analysts have totally put a grasp on just how rare it is to find a running back that has this first round pedigree, that's coming into the league, coming from Alabama, a pro system, and then going to an offense like the Steelers that use a featured running back. He's getting 18 plus touches minimum. Like, that's happening. They're talking about lining him up at X wide receiver. Like, he's going to be utilized in the passing game. Ben Roethlisberger has turned into a check down machine. He wants to use him in the passing game. they had other holes in their roster they needed to address, but they chose to draft Najee Harris with the first round pick. This kid is going to get used. And Yates, I don't know if you've done your projections on the Steelers yet.
Not yet.
But once you get there, I want you to report back to me and just how high Najee Harris is, because
Are you giving him an assignment? Is this homework this weekend?
Yes.
Yates, when you come in Monday, make sure you have your Najee Harris book report done. And I want a nice cover on that, too. I want a very nice cover done.
So what I'm saying is, when you're done with that, you're going to come back to me and you're going to say, holy crap, I'm too low. He came back, I don't even know if I want to say it, at number 5 in my projections.
Wow.
So again, we haven't seen him play in the NFL, so does that mean I'm going to draft him at number 5? No, but if you get him in the second round, theft. Absolute theft right now. And then the other one's Clyde Edwards-Helaire. We've talked about him on the show a couple times in regards to why I believe he's a value, and no major signings on that team. Darrell Williams is his backup, another first-round talent playing for one of the highest scoring offenses in the NFL. Was the RB11 before Le'Veon Bell arrived last year. And if you were to add one touchdown, he only scored one touchdown in the first 6 weeks, but was the RB11. If you add one touchdown, so if he had scored 2 touchdowns through 6 games, not too much to ask, folks, he would have been the RB5 during that time.
What?
So again,
Wow.
So Clyde Edwards-Helaire, extremely undervalued right now. I'm not saying draft him as an RB1. I am saying you're getting him as an RB2, and you have top 5 legitimate upside.
Yeah, and I think what's also going to happen too is you're getting that negative correction in the market where people got so excited, too excited, they bumped him up into like top 6 overall picks last year, and then they were disappointed because he didn't return that. And I think that was silly to begin with. I think you got to be very careful when you put a rookie into the first round of a fantasy draft,
now,
period.
Joe, I like to admit my mistakes. So here's the thing.
Yeah,
Edwards-Helaire,
me too. I think that's the best thing you can do as an analyst.
But when this happened last year, when Edwards-Helaire and we found out about Damian Williams going to be missing the entire year, I bumped him up, and he came at number 7 or number 8 in my projections, and then I got to the point of 6 or 7 in the draft, and I was like, I kind of like the bit of the unknown. Like I want to embrace that, and that's why I was willing to go even more than my projections were saying, which was dumb, like looking back in retrospect. But again, Najee Harris in the first round of projections, I have him as 8 more fantasy points than Ezekiel Elliott, who I also think is being undervalued in a certain way.
Yeah, I got to tell you, with Helaire, I think it's also a matter of you're going to have a lot of angry people from last year who got kind of very disappointed by Clyde Edwards-Helaire and basically, like you, set themselves up for failure in that sense, if I may. Set themselves up for failure. Now they're pissed off about it, and now they don't want to touch him, and I think that's why you're seeing RB18 with him. And in terms of Najee Harris at RB15, I'm with you. Look, to me, he's one of those jumpers. Like, you can get him in the second round. That's fantastic. You're going to be able to move. There's a good chance that he finishes in the top 10 of running backs. A very good chance. You have him potentially even higher than that. And I think that's where the value is. The trick is, as we get into the summer, where that moves to. For me, it's another rookie running back. It's actually Travis Etienne at number 24. I'm looking into the future here. In the early going, there's going to be guys that pop up as streamers, matchup guys, injuries that happen. I can kind of float. What I want is that guy who is going to be a difference maker the way Taylor, Montgomery, those guys were in the second half of last year. I think Travis Etienne, as the season goes on, will get stronger and stronger. Again, first round draft capital. This is the group that took him. Undrafted free agent who came out of nowhere ahead of him. So many things line up for this value where you're getting him almost as an RB3. I want him on my roster, and I'm willing to take early hits for that long projectability. Again, it's now a 17-game season. And it's one extra game. That matters. I think it's going to matter for Etienne as we move forward. Let's talk about wide receivers, because there's one guy that all three of us agree on. So everybody needs to, come down to the fire. I'm going to go, put on my cardigan sweater, and we're going to tell you a story, boys and girls, about Julio Jones and why Julio Jones right now is not getting the love he deserves. And when all three of us are in agreement, very strong about something, I think that's a signal that everyone should stand up and take notice. So we'll all take turns here of telling you why everybody's wrong about Julio Jones and why we're right. Yates, why don't you tell everyone why we're right?
So when I did this, when I entered, I think Julio was at wide receiver 14. I think that he was even lower than what he is right now.
We've
at
moved
wide
the
receiver
needle
12.
already.
So,
Yeah.
we didn't even say anything. With Julio, I think that we talked about this on one of the podcasts that we did this week, Joe, where we said, like, the opportunity here for Julio when he is on the field in this offense, where I think that it is going to be a little bit more pass happy than what we can just copy and paste from Tennessee with Arthur Smith. So the opportunity is here for Julio. It all comes down to him staying on the field, right? Do you want to be, and you brought up the argument, do you want to be a year early on these guys rather than a year late as far as jumping ship? And with Julio, that would be more of a conversation in Dynasty versus Redraft, where with Redraft, where you're getting him right now as a wide receiver 2 on your roster, because I think that his ADP is going to be even lower than his ECR ranking. You can get him as a wide receiver 2 on your roster. He's going to finish as a top 10 receiver if he is healthy all 16 games. Even if he isn't fully healthy, he's still going to be on the field because he's Julio Jones. He plays through nagging injuries and still puts up ridiculous production. So I think Calvin Ridley is going to take over as far as that wide receiver 1 on this team as far as target share. But Julio, I think, has there's more than enough volume for Julio to still be very, very relevant.
He's wide receiver 12 and half point PPR ECR. And if that's too many letters for you, I'll give you a moment to let that sink in. Tags in the meantime. Julio Jones, your take.
Stupid.
Could you be less specific?
I mean, if you're going to be as your wide receiver 2, I mean, you're doing a phenomenal job. Basically, there's some tremendous values right now, and does it hold up? I don't know. I'm tired of people saying Julio Jones injury prone. The dude has played at least 14 games in the previous 6 seasons. He missed time last year, and by the way, last year he averaged 11.3 yards per target, the highest mark of his entire career. In the 9 games he played, which was a little bit over half the season, he was on pace for 91 receptions, 1,371 yards, and 6 touchdowns. So Calvin Ridley, what he does for that offense in terms of like these two, A and B, I still think Julio's the guy. I do. Ridley is right there. It's a 1A and 1B situation where defenses are forced to choose and you really just can't. And then now you add Kyle Pitts to that matter, and you add Arthur Smith, a guy that turned the Titans into one of the most efficient offenses we've ever seen. And it's like, okay, now you get to work with this group. So Julio Jones, I mean, as long as the dude's playing, you're starting him. That's basically what it is. And Yates in Dynasty, I wrote an article the other day, best Dynasty target on every team. He's going as wide receiver 31 in startups right now.
Yep.
Give me a break.
No, somebody just texted me actually yesterday about where they got him, and I think in the some crazy round. I just couldn't believe it. I was like, how can he last that long? And I get you want to project to the future, but let's win now a little bit. Everything the guy said, I'm on board with, and I just want to add this one bit too. That yes, he's had some injuries, but he played through them, as Tags kind of mentioned. Yeah, that's kind of important. Like I want the guy to get out there, and if you're giving me a discount on him, and I kind of brought this up the other day, I'm just going to reiterate it. There was a discount going in last year to DeAndre Hopkins, where people were starting to worry about DeAndre Hopkins. Well, he's not there anymore, in the old spot and all that stuff. Who cares? Okay, DeAndre Hopkins is a phenomenal talent. Julio Jones is a phenomenal talent that just produces every single year. And you haven't seen decline in the productivity. And that's the whole thing to keep in mind. If you're seeing decline in the productivity on top of the injury, that's when I start to get worried. I don't think we've seen that combination. Therefore, I'm still in. And I think that's kind of where we're at. Go ahead, Tex.
Yeah, no, Joe. When people talk about, he played through injuries and he cost me some. The dude legitimately minimum of 1,394 yards in 6 years straight. That's basically Justin Jefferson minimum every single year. It's like, really? Come on.
I'm with you, man. I'll take it. We're gonna have a lot of shares this year of Julio Jones, the 3 of us. I can't wait for the first draft the 3 of us are in to see who ends up with
reaches first.
We should have a little side wager. I feel like a side wager's coming there. All right. Speaking of fun, want to remind everybody you've been keeping up with our content here recently. You'll know we're huge fans of Underdog Fantasy and some exciting contests that they're running right now, including, of course, Best Ball Mania 2, the tournament, the biggest best ball tournament in the history of best ball. $3.5 million in total prizes and a ridiculous $1 million prize to first place. Again, for you basketball fans out there too, they also have contests running through the NBA playoffs at Underdog Fantasy. So head over to underdogfantasy.com, use that promo code FantasyPros, and you'll receive a free contest entry with your first deposit. That's underdogfantasy.com, promo code FantasyPros. Claim your free entry to Best Ball Mania 2 today. All right, let's move off of Julio Jones and talk about who, obviously Julio, a fan favorite here of the show for anybody who's been listening the last few weeks. But let's move on here to another wide receiver that we have some feelings on. So, Yates, take us through the rest of your grouping in terms of overrated, underrated. Who you got?
Yeah, the guy that I'll talk about here as far as another underrated player is Michael Pittman Jr. Now, I was hyping up Pittman last year, and he got off to a slow start, but then as soon as we saw him step into the lineup, we saw him make an impact. And he's ranked right now as ECR wide receiver 48. There are people on Twitter right now that are like, give me Parris Campbell over Pittman Jr. straight up. I'm like, what are we doing here? You'd have like a
don't
do that.
The bear.
Don't do
that. Don't worry.
Tags.
You wait. Go ahead, Yates. You keep going here.
With Pittman, he is, in my opinion, the undisputed wide receiver 1 on this team. where T.Y. Hilton now at 31, 32 years old, yes, he's going to see some more involvement deep down the field because you do have Carson Wentz, who has a bit of a stronger arm than Phillip Rivers, the ghost of Phillip Rivers. So, but Pittman was someone who I was a big fan of coming out of college, out of USC. He showed enough last year for me to buy in. And now you're telling me that I can get the wide receiver 1 for this offense as the wide receiver 48, like that is just ridiculous. I think that I'm going to have him ranked very, very high, a lot higher than this. So Pittman is going to be a guy that I'm targeting everywhere again this year, and I think that it's going to be a winning strategy.
All right, Tags, you seem to have some feelings about that because you give me I don't know about that. I know you love Parris Campbell. I've heard you talk about it before. Mm-hmm. I'm actually on Team Yates here with this one about Pittman. I love what I saw last year out of Pittman. I think there's a lot of growth potential there. What is it about Campbell that excites you? Because just want to touch on that in terms of the offense because you did make a face.
No, Parris Campbell.
I want the words.
Parris Campbell in Week 1 last year, 6 catches for 71 yards on 9 targets. That's a number that Michael Pittman hit once the remainder of the season, and that was without Parris Campbell on the field. Parris Campbell was a high second-round pick. This team loved him. Michael Pittman is a different receiver, and now with Carson Wentz coming there, Carson Wentz has loved his targets over the middle of the field throughout his career. I mean, even going to Nelson Aguilar, who he's done fine on the perimeter elsewhere, but he's struggled with the Eagles. So I think part of it comes down to Carson Wentz and what he prefers and the efficiency targets where they come from, whether it be the tight ends or the slot receivers. So I'm just saying, I'm not going to sit here and say it's a slam dunk that Parris Campbell's better than Pittman. I actually think I think Pittman's too high in the rankings right now. I have them both around wide receiver 50, and that's because there's a lot to be determined here. We don't know a lot about Carson Wentz in terms of what he's going to favor here. T.Y. Hilton, are they going to move him into the slot now that he's older in his career? I don't know if he's built to withstand those hits over the middle of the field. So I think I can see a situation. I'm just saying it's not crazy to say Parris Campbell's a better play.
Okay, fair enough. Let's talk about your other undervalued guy, because I know you got another one, and surprise, surprise, it's a rookie.
Well, of course. I'm turning into that guy this year, which is fine. I mean, with the way the NFL is trending, I'm okay being that guy because we see a lot of these receivers pop off. Jamar Chase is a better prospect than T. Higgins was, and I don't think anybody would dispute that, correct? Okay, so if we get Jamar Chase with the chemistry he has built in with Joe Burrow in the exact offense that T. Higgins was just in, with A.J. Green and his 108 targets gone, with his top 10 in the NFL air yards, why the hell is Jamar Chase falling into wide receiver 3 territory?
It's a fair question.
He's extremely undervalued right now. It sucks because I think all of us on the show, we were talking about T. Higgins as one of the guys that was like major breakout this year, like potentially like a top 12 wide receiver. T. Higgins, in the 8 full games that he played as a starter with Joe Burrow, he was the number 11 wide receiver. So therefore, it's like, I think that there's top 12 in the range of scenarios for Jamar Chase. I think T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd maybe hold him back from that. But as a wide receiver 2, absolutely.
Now, Jamar Chase is going right now in ECR wide receiver 30. All 3 of us have him higher, correct? I think we all have him in the low 20s or somewhere. Okay. Now, I think I have him in like right around 20-ish. Where do you guys have him?
I have him at 21 right now, and I could see him going higher.
This is the in process, by the way. I'm going to put the air quotes for the in process. Where's your in process number on him right now, Yates? Do you have that kind of?
My in process number, 15. It is. I'm going to be very, very high on Jamar Chase because of everything that Tags mentioned, but then it's just the opportunity in this offense where the amount of 11 personnel that they ran, the amount of pass attempts that they have, like the opportunity here for Jamar Chase already with the chemistry that he has with Joe Burrow, there is more than enough passing volume to go around for Chase and Higgins to be very, very fantasy relevant. I think Boyd will still be relevant more as a wide receiver 3, but I think Chase is going to step onto the field and hit the ground running. So if you can get him at a discount of wide receiver 30, man, sign me up.
Yeah, I think a 3 for 3 there. We're all very excited about Chase. A couple guys for me that I think are underrated in terms of ECR. CeeDee Lamb is at 19 right now, and I'm telling you, he's my guy to jump from a 2 to a 1 this year. Just put in the books. And I think it's a great value. I love this because you can go hit running back early, and if you want to be that team that goes quarterback early, you can go make it up a little bit later on with CeeDee Lamb, who's going right around that 20 spot too. Marvin Jones at 47, I think, is fascinating because I think people are kind of underestimating how good he's been at times. And now you're giving him a good young quarterback, and everyone's talking about Chenault and everyone's talking about Shark, but nobody's talking about Jones, and I kind of love that because basically it suppresses his value. And an ECR 47 in the half-point PPR, I'm watching very closely to see where that goes. If it stays, I'm all in. And then Devonta Smith is another one, which I know Tags is very excited because he's a rookie. He's at wide receiver 42 right now. I think that's too low. I just do. I just think he's going to get a ton of the volume, a ton of the work. I think this new group sees him as the workhorse in this offense, and I think that's something to be aware of. Now, in terms of overrated guys, I know I've got one, and Tags and I agree on Kenny Golladay being overrated. We don't like the opening to his schedule. We don't like the turnovers from Daniel Jones. What is it that you think also makes Kenny Golladay, Tags, overrated in your mind?
I mean, as you mentioned, early in the schedule is not great. He is going to be treated as that number one option. He's had the privilege of playing with Matthew Stafford for the beginning of his career, a quarterback that is willing to throw it to tight coverage, trust his wide receivers, and throw the ball deep. Galladay's averaged over 15 yards per catch every single season. Daniel Jones, unfortunately, doesn't throw the ball deep very often. Is it a product of the offense? Maybe they change it a little bit with the addition of Kenny Golladay, but we haven't seen, even going back to Daniel Jones in college, he wasn't a guy with a big arm. He doesn't take shots down the field the way Matthew Stafford does. And now all of a sudden you're looking at a crowded room of pass catchers in New York. You have, Sterling Shepard, you have Darius Slayton, you have Kadarius Toney, you have Evan Engram, Kyle Rudolph, and Saquon Barkley coming back. So there's just, where do these consistent targets come from? And honestly, Daniel Jones was a guy, what did he throw? 11 touchdowns last year? I mean...
Well, it's hard to throw touchdowns when you have the amount of turnovers that he does, between the
fumbles,
picks, between the fumbles, everything. I mean, it's a stunning amount of turnovers that he's had. Yates, when you look at Kenny Golladay, I feel like part of the reason why he maintains the ADP is what we've seen out of him, always that potential guy, always a guy that's been very impressive. But also, let's face it, he did sign in a big media market in New York, and that's going to bring a lot of attention. In your opinion, do you think that he's also being a little overvalued? Because right now, you look at some of the names around him, I think a lot of the names around him have equal, if not more, potential.
Yeah, there are some people that are saying that Kenny Golladay can be a wide receiver 1 this season for fantasy, and I just don't see it. Tags mentioned the Daniel Jones skill set and Kenny Galladay's skill set. These really don't match up. Daniel Jones over the past 2 seasons, an 8.4 and an 8.0 ADOT, and then Kenny Galladay's ADOT over the past couple of years is 16.1 and 14.7. So it's like, what's going to break here, right? Is Jones going to continue to lean on the players in the underneath areas of the field? I just don't see Kenny Golladay coming into this offense, this loaded offense, and getting 7 to 8 targets per game. Yes, he can catch almost all of them in contested situations. He's ridiculous. He's a ridiculous talent. So I think why people are leaning on Golladay a little bit more and being more excited is because of, one, his talent, and then the contract. That he signed that big contract, and that means that he's going to be heavily targeted in this offense. I just don't think that those two... I don't think that the contract is going to correlate to targets. So
that's fair. And you're talking about wide receiver 21 in ECR and half-point PPR. CeeDee Lamb is at 19, and I look at the Cowboys offense with Dak Prescott, and that's a no-brainer. You give me those two guys on the board, I'm going CeeDee Lamb every single time and twice on Sunday. Last one here we'll get to, because I know, Tags, you had one more overvalued wide receiver, which is Will Fuller, who's going at wide receiver 33. Now, that doesn't seem like a huge investment, but yet you were still into that, third wide receiver range, and certainly you can argue some upside. Is it Tua that holds you back here, or is it just Will Fuller himself?
It's a combination of so many factors. I mean, even going back to last year with Deshaun Watson as his quarterback, with no DeAndre Hopkins, Fuller was being drafted in like the 27 to 30 range, and there's a reason for that, because he's been a boomer bust receiver throughout his career. He's dealt with a variety of injuries throughout his career. We don't know if he's going to be that number one option. He played lights out last year. Is it a product of the performance enhancing thing? I don't know. Is that why he stayed healthy? If something keeps Will Fuller healthy, it should be legal. But Fuller is suspended for the first week of the season. They added Jalen Waddle, who's a better player. I'm sorry. I'm just going to say it. I'm just going to say it already. I like Jalen Waddle as a player more than I do Will Fuller. It's not taking anything away from Fuller. I think Waddle's ceiling is just to the moon. And then you have Devontae Parker, who's not just going to go away. I mean, I think Parker is actually overvalued right now, but he's not going to just go away. He's still going to get targets. So you start adding everything, and it's going to be tough for any of these Dolphins wide receivers to get consistent targets. And Will Fuller, he's proven, if he in the games that he's actually played without Deshaun Watson, he was bad, like legit bad. Whereas DeAndre Hopkins, he made it work. Like, he wasn't as good, but he made it work with other quarterbacks. Fuller was a little bit more reliant, and Tua just hasn't shown it yet. I mean, there's questions about Tua and whether or not he could support fantasy relevant wide receivers, let alone 3 of them. So I just feel like it's just a little aggressive where you're paying for one of the best case scenarios with him.
Yates, would you rather have Will Fuller at with ECR 32, I think he is, or 33, or would you rather have at 52 Jalen Waddle?
Oh, straight up. I might go Waddle. I mean, just straight up. But then when you factor in the value, yeah, give me Waddle all day.
For sure.
And I figured Tags would say the same thing. Just wanted to get your thoughts on that. So there you have it. There's a really great discussion about some debates and some early overrated and underrated guys based on their ECR. And we are only in May, but that's enough time to start identifying these things for early drafts, for best ball, for dynasty even. We even touched on today, which we weren't even going to, but you know what? We're just full service here at Fantasy Pros. We can't help ourselves from helping you. So we want to make sure that you're ready for all of your drafts and all the coverage that we got going on. And make sure you subscribe to Fantasy Pros wherever you get your podcasts, obviously, and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Don't forget about that Calvin Ridley jersey, fantasypros.com/contest to get involved with that. And I want to thank our sponsors of today's show. That's sheathunderwear.com/fantasypros for 20% off of your order of Sheath underwear. It's fantastic, by the way. They sent us some. It is good stuff, let me tell you. Love it. And you know what else is good stuff? Best ball. So go to underdogfantasy.com, use the code FANTASYPROS to receive a free entry to Best Ball Mania 2. That'll do it for Tags and Yates, but the story of the game goes on. I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Make sure to check out our featured videos as well. Also, make sure to click that red subscribe button to get notified when we post videos in the future.